All right, it's my pleasure now to welcome on professional wrestler from New Japan Pro Wrestling, Robbie Eagles. Robbie, how are you today, mate?
I'm doing pretty good, Chris. Thanks for having me on. Little earlier start for me. I like to sleep in on these off days, but you know what? For this opportunity to have a chat, I'm pretty keen to get up.
No, that's absolutely sensational, mate. We're absolutely thrilled to have you on and really looking forward to jumping into it. I guess first off, what's a normal off day for you look like?
It's funny because an off day isn't really an off day at all. I do tend to wake up probably around 9, 10 a.m. local time because I don't have any, daily house chores that I would have when I'm back home. And yeah, it's kind of just look after my nutrition, get up and maybe go have a coffee to start the day and try and like kind of just spend some time outside. Although right now I'm doing a 2 week quarantine, so I can't go anywhere really besides just outside the front door. And then at some point I'll train, and that'll usually be 2 times a day. I'll do cardio at some point and then weights at some point, and they might alternate. I might do weights in the morning and then cardio in the afternoon, and then I'll bounce that around as well. And then it's all just other maintenance, stretching, limbering up, and studying my sport. So I'll probably put something on the iPad here and either study myself from a previous match or study something from the past or from the present to kind of like keep me on my toes and make sure that I can be at my peak performance.
So your off days look a little bit different to mine, where I'm on the couch and then in bed and then back to the couch.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do have days like that, but they're more few and far between.
Yeah, no, good stuff. All right, let's get into a bit about you. So you were born and raised in Liverpool, New South Wales. What was it like growing up in New South Wales, and what was Robbie like as a kid?
So it's funny, like, I mean, the thing that's resonated with me the whole way up until my adulthood, and it was definitely apparent when I was a kid, was I was always the shorter kid. So even playing soccer for about 5, 6 years, just in general being in like the school class photos, I was always right down the bottom of these photos because I wasn't tall, so I couldn't stand at the back, and I was so short that I had to sit sometimes with like the girls in the school photos, which was a little bit embarrassing. But like there was like me and maybe one other person that were quite height impaired, is the way I'd like to put it. So that was kind of one of the main things that I like. I guess like I could get picked on for it, but it was also like my trait is just that I was the shorter kid in the group. And growing up was pretty good, man. Like I had it quite well. Like both my parents were awesome. I wasn't deprived. I also wasn't spoiled, so I was somewhere in between. So I was quite humble as a kid, and there was probably some times where I wasn't, and I wanted everything and didn't get it, and might have thrown a tantrum as most kids would have. But eventually I got out of that, and kind of my saving grace. The other thing that people knew me for was I was the wrestling kid. I was the kid that was obsessed with this thing that was a bit obscure and it was popular at one point, but then it was still kind of looked down upon by like, most of the other kids in school and all that sort of jazz. And yeah, so if anyone all of a sudden watched a wrestling event or had a wrestling question, they'd come racing to me and they'd be like, hey, we want to know about this, or what do you think about these two guys? If they ever fight, who's going to win? So it was kind of cool, but it also was a detriment at certain points in time.
Yeah, I know my childhood was spent like watching SmackDown, Raw, and I was obsessed. And I guess I'm still obsessed with, Stone Cold and The Rock. Like, what was it that got you into wrestling?
So I had changed schools kind of early on between finishing year 3 and then about to start year 4. We changed schools because we were still living in the same area, but it was kind of, I think, just like a financial decision for my parents to switch me over to a public school from where I was before. And upon doing that, my sister also started high school in a new area, and we met a bunch of new friends, and they kind of introduced me to soccer. So through knowing them at the soccer club, we then got invited to their house, and I didn't know what to expect that day. And what they put on was a WCW pay-per-view. And so this would have been around 1998 or so. And I was already into, normal kid stuff, Power Rangers, Ninja Turtles, Spider-Man comics, X-Men, all the sort of things that were happening in the 90s at that point. And when they turn on this wrestling thing that I'd never seen before, I see luchadors, the Mexican wrestlers, dressed in head-to-toe costumes with masks and capes and everything, and they're doing incredible acrobatic moves. And I'm like, holy cow, this is like Power Rangers, but to me it was real. So I was like, these are real life people, and this isn't like a TV show. There's no explosions or anything like that. It's just like two dudes fighting in a boxing ring is the way that I was looking at it. So I was hooked from day one. And then you had guys like Sting and Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage were in the company at the time. So you had these really over the top characters that I was associating with those TV shows that I was watching as a kid, that I was like, oh, it's the same thing, but it's like a real thing. And then I think it was, like the acrobatics, the moves itself, that not so much the violence, it was just kind of the athleticism behind it all. Because obviously I was playing soccer, I was watching rugby league as well, but I wasn't too much of a sports guy, I guess. I was more of like a cartoon superhero kind of guy. And that was like my closest way into like becoming more of a sports person. So yeah, it was just the age-old story a lot of people give. Once I saw it, I was hooked, and then I never looked back.
Yeah, I remember meeting Rey Mysterio when I was a kid, and he was probably one of my favorites just because of the fact that I was able to meet him. I remember seeing him do this thing where I feel like he came in between like two of the what do you call the ropes, and like
Yep.
kicked someone in the face with like both his shoes. And I was like, as a kid, I was like, oh, I want to do that to someone so badly.
Well, if it's any pleasing thought for you, I actually do a variation of that same move in the ring now. So that's my ode to Rey Mysterio being my favorite wrestler as a kid.
No, that's sensational. At what point did you sort of think, I want to I actually want to start doing this?
From that first day, basically. Because I remember I have vivid memories of, even in year 4, that first year of that immediate change. And that was like the big year for me, because that's when I remember meeting my new friends at my new school. Obviously, I got introduced to wrestling and I became super hooked on it at that point. I remember drawing myself as a wrestler, and it was something like draw yourself as your job that you want to do when you grow up, or your dream job or whatever. And I drew myself as a wrestler, which, I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. So a lot of people are drawing themselves as, professional soccer players, or footy stars, or doctors and firefighters, and like really elaborate kind of like, but like attainable jobs, I guess. And here I am drawing myself with a championship belt, and people are like, what are you doing? It's a bit silly, isn't it? It's like drawing yourself as Superman. You can't be Superman when you grow up. So yeah, it was pretty much immediate. I always had that goal. And once I finished high school, I took the plunge and went straight in.
I'm probably jumping ahead here, but is that not cool to think that the fact that, at 7 years old, you drew yourself as that, and now you're here and you're like, well, holy shit, I actually did that.
Yeah, I wake up every day, even before I was working for New Japan Pro Wrestling, when I was just an independent wrestler in Australia, kind of toiling the weekends and making ends meet with like a 9 to 5 on the side. I would wake up every day and be super thankful because I was living my dream. Like every day that I was a professional wrestler, I could say I am living my dream. That thing that I said I was going to do as a 7-year-old, I am doing in one way or another. Like whether it was as a profession or more as like a weekend warrior kind of gig back then. I was very, very lucky, and I still do that to this day. So I've been doing it 13 years, and I'm never not grateful or thankful for where I am, and that kid that drew himself as a 7-year-old staying so focused and determined on eventually doing this one day.
I absolutely love people who show a lot of gratitude. Talk about that weekend warrior independent wrestling scene, sort of growing up before you find yourself in Japan, and sort of just explain that, and sort of maybe like how difficult that is to sort of, claw away at a dream essentially.
I would always relate it closely to being in like a pub band, I guess, because, a lot of the times I think where people start out when they first start a band, or they're as an artist or whatever, they're going to play the pub scene, right? Because that's the easiest thing to provide live music on a Friday night or Saturday night or whatever it may be. But a lot of these groups and people, they want to make it big. They're not just playing the music just for, a little bit of a tickle and a laugh. They want to do it because they want to practice and get better and get a good crowd reception. And that's kind of what it was like being an independent wrestler in Australia. We were basically like the pub scene of pro wrestling. So we were just touring to venue, some bigger, some smaller. Especially when I started, the average crowd size was anywhere from 50 to 150, maybe 200 if you were lucky. And that was a big deal, you know, like if you got 200 people in like a small intimate venue, you were like, yes, we made it. This is the big time. Like this is a big show for us. But it was kind of just like learning the craft, learning what works for each audience because each audience is different, and learning how I operated in the ring as a professional wrestler. Like what were my strengths, what were my weaknesses. And I was training, 3 to 4 days a week back then as well, because I was obviously learning. And as a younger wrestler, you don't, even now, you don't stop learning. So you always got to train, just like most professional athletes. Like you could be, the winner of the medals at the end of the year for AFL or for NRL or whatever it may be, but it doesn't mean the next year you just take off training and only show up for the games. You've got to stay sharp. So it's kind of a lot of that. So a lot of training, self-review, and then just going out there and doing the best I could every time in front of, again, it didn't matter if it was 50 people or in my head 50,000. I was performing to the same sort of ability. And yeah, there was a lot of dark days. There was a lot of times where like you'd get paid $20 and that would either pay for your train ticket home or for petrol on the way back of a 4-hour drive or whatever you've done, or it would just get you Macca's on the way home for dinner because you haven't eaten all day. And it would look bleak. You'd be like, what am I doing? Like every time I was going out there, if I got injured, I'd risk going to work the next day for like my actual job that was supporting my wrestling habit. Sometimes I'd have to take time off from work, and most people would put in their 2 weeks and take a vacation or a holiday, whereas I'm putting in a day here, a day there, just so I can like go to Melbourne for a weekend or go to Perth for a couple of days, whatever opportunity presented itself, because I was looking at everything as I need to get further exposure. I need to become a bigger household name in professional wrestling in Australia. I need to be everywhere. So I need to take those opportunities as they come. And yeah, it was bleak. It was very bleak. But then the industry started booming locally, and I was lucky to have stuck it out. I had definitely seen a lot of my peers and colleagues and friends that had come and gone, those that had started before me and those that started after me. So many people would not last because of how dim it would look as an independent professional wrestler. But we went through a boom period in Australia. We started getting more attention internationally, and there's a lot more Australians doing great things, especially in places like America, the UK. There's a few in Mexico, and I'm trying to be one of the few in Japan that's representing our country.
How hard is it to, or sorry, not how hard, but how beneficial do you think it was for, say, taking those, say, just one day here and one day there, or rather than say going, I'm just going to take 2 weeks so I can sort of relax and not stress, because there's that whole scrappy mentality where you're just getting shit done and you're not making excuses. Do you think that's helped you in the long run?
Yeah, I think so. It's kept me on more of like, I guess, like a tight schedule. Because with wrestling, especially now for my schedule, I'll be on for 4 or 5 days straight with some travel days either side of those days of wrestling. And then the time off is very few and far between. So kind of going from, hey, I've got a pretty solid 9 to 5. I'll take Friday off, which I'll then travel to Victoria, do a match, come back Saturday, do a match in New South Wales, have Sunday as like I can sit on the couch and kind of like regain my thoughts. But then Monday I'm back to the 9 to 5 and I have to apply myself fully there. Like I'm not slacking off. I'm not being lazy at that job, because it was like a weird balance. Like I had to play seesaw with the two, like I had to keep the job to keep food on the table and also support my wrestling habit, because sometimes I was paying for my own airfare as a younger wrestler. Sometimes I was putting a lot of money into the wrestling gear, or costumes, as people will say, to make sure that I stood out and looked the best, or paying for my gym membership, which wasn't helping my 9 to 5. It was helping my wrestling habit. Mm. So yeah, it was a very tough balancing act. Not having to do that now makes me more focused and determined on what I do as my job and my sole income earning, which is pro wrestling, which I'm super thankful for. But it took me, almost 11 years to get to this point. And there was a lot of that hardship and a lot of that kind of, like you said, like battling mentality that got me to where I was. Because there were so many times where I very easily could have quit and just been like, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore. There was a point in time where I started looking at the firefighters course because I was just like, wrestling isn't it. Like, it's not doing it for me. I'm not making it. I'm small. I'm not what the big companies are looking for. Maybe I have to look for like a real long-term career that's outside of this, but I'm glad I didn't.
Do you remember a moment where you were actually close to pulling the pin, or have you always sort of been like, yeah, okay, today sucked, but you know what? I got through yesterday. I'll get through today and we'll move on to tomorrow.
There's definitely been times where I've heavily doubted myself and almost been on that brink. Even like for a whole day, I might have considered it and, looked at other options and spoken to my now wife, who I've been with for over 10 years. Like spoken to her and been like, hey, like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this. And it wasn't that my passion wasn't there. It was just, I felt really defeated by big opportunities coming my way and then, not being able to make the most out of them or not getting what I thought I deserved. In 2014, I had my first tryout with a big company, and it was with the WWE in Melbourne at Rod Laver Arena. And going into that, I was already told by happenstance of being CC'd on an email I shouldn't have been CC'd on, that I was too small, I wasn't appealing, and I definitely wasn't going to pick up a contract, but I was welcome to attend the tryouts anyway, which was kind of a kick in the teeth, but it made me kind of go, oh, well, fuck it. Like, I have nothing to lose here. So like, who cares? Then I went into that weekend and I thought I performed really well. I was in the best shape I had been in a long time at that point because I was very determined. And I could tell I wasn't being looked at by any of the scouts or the coaches. And I was kind of walked away from that weekend going, oh shit, like if I'm not even getting any feedback, if I'm not even getting looked at, no matter me outperforming some of the other people here, like what's the point? I then went on a 4-week vacation to the US, and that rekindled my spirit for pro wrestling because I got to have an actual holiday. And then I came back and I was like, nah, you know what? I really like doing it here in Australia and I really like being a professional wrestler. And then again, I think in 2016, I probably had a moment like that. That's probably when I started looking at the firefighting thing as an option. And then 2017, that's when the doors to New Japan Pro Wrestling started opening because we started having people like Will Ospreay, like Bad Luck Fale, who work here, come to Australia and create opportunities for me to be seen by the right people. And as that door cracked open and I could start seeing the light, and I knew my foot was in that crack because a lot of people were barracking for me and trying to get me a spot here. There was a lot of times where I thought it should have already happened and then it didn't. And then 2018 rolled around and the same sort of thing started happening. Like there'd be an opportunity and then I'd hear nothing. And I'd be like, fuck, like, what am I doing? Am I doing something wrong? Am I close to achieving this goal, or is it still out of reach? And then all it was is I just had to wait a little longer. I did more tryouts. I did more seminars. Anytime someone from this company was in Australia, I was there to make sure I was in front of them. I performed well. I represented myself. And one of the things that I have a reputation for is just being a nice guy. So I think that goes a long way because it's what a lot of people in this industry have. That's the main thing they have to say about me. So I think that worked in my favor. And yeah, I just kept my foot in that wedged door and eventually it opened all the way and I saw the light and I walked through.
Yeah, never hurts to be a nice guy. So explain to someone who might not understand the whole process in terms of, creating a character and, sort of owning that and sort of making that work.
A lot of it now is gone are the days of the Hulk Hogan's and like your Andre the Giants and people of that nature, where they're these larger than life, almost fictional, cartoonish characters. It's now very much, there might be a bit of a gimmick or a bit of pizzazz behind the look of the person, but what you see in the ring is kind of what you get outside of it too. It's very much ourselves. And there was a common verbiage that was used there. It's you turned up to 11. But I don't think it's quite that, because sometimes that can be too extreme. It's just you being comfortable being in the ring. And me in the ring is me in general. And that's my like safe spot. When I'm in the ring, I feel super, super comfortable because that's all I've wanted to do. So Robbie in the ring is Robbie outside of the ring. It's just, there's a lot more aggression and fighting spirit in the ring, obviously, because I'm getting beat up and I have to dish it out as well. Just like an MMA fighter. A lot of the times they're not super over the top. They're quite humble. Someone that I look to for inspiration on that sort of side of things to like bring into my character is the current featherweight champion of UFC, Alexander Volkanovski. Because he doesn't live far from me. He's in Windang, New South Wales, near Wollongong. And he's such a humble guy, but he's the champion of the UFC and represents Australia. And then he goes into the octagon and he fights his fucking heart out and he beats the shit out of people. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I want to be. I want to be the same as him. So that's pretty much the characterization part of it. Obviously, there's going to be a few bells and whistles that you can add on to stand out more amongst the crop, especially when it comes to a TV-produced pro wrestling company. And then you've got things like your entrance can be a bit of a big deal. Certain poses and stuff that you do are done in a way so that kids and other people can recreate that in photos, so they can show their adulation towards you. But besides that, it's very much, a lot of the wrestlers now is exactly who they are, maybe just with like a slight turn on the dial, not quite to 11.
Yeah, sure. I know you said you're a nice guy, and that obviously that's who you are, but was there not a part of you that was kind of tempted to be like, man, how good would it be to be a villain in this?
Well, I was pushed in that direction initially, and it didn't quite work out. People could tell that it wasn't authentic. So yeah, there's definitely, I was on the wrong side of a war. I started in a group called the Bullet Club, and they're, not the kindest dudes. But that was my opportunity to get here to New Japan Pro Wrestling. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to take it because they're giving me entry and they're saying I can be a part of this prestigious group that a lot of great wrestlers have been a part of. And then I was sticking out like a sore thumb. I was the nice guy amongst the bad eggs. So when an opportunity presented itself to switch sides to where I am now in a group called Chaos, who are more righteous, more about just winning by the means of the rules in pro wrestling, I kind of took it and jumped, and I haven't looked back since.
Yeah, let's talk about Japan and that opportunity. You mentioned in 2017 or 2018 that the door opened slightly and you had your foot in there. Talk about that moment and sort of the realization that, hey, 11 years of fucking hard work and toiling and self-doubts and whatever was essentially coming to an end, and you were starting to get an opportunity.
So I think where it all kind of started is Will Ospreay, who's a very famous, touted professional wrestler in the world, and he's been shared on things like I think Sportsbet and tab accounts on Facebook have shared videos of his not knowing what it was. They just saw it was some crazy wrestling. He made a trip to Australia and New Zealand, and I was fortunate enough to wrestle him in Sydney. And he was so red hot at that time that we got one of the largest attended crowds that we had. We were performing at a brand new building, and this was for Pro Wrestling Australia, my home promotion, the place where I grew up and started training and have been a part of since day one. And we wrestled in the main event, and it was a match that really changed the landscape for local professional wrestling because it brought a lot of new eyes to it. And a lot of people didn't just look at the main event as the only match they remembered. They remembered the undercard. They remembered all the local people that were on the mat, on the show. So once that happened, I wrestled Will. I didn't win, which I kind of, had doubts of going into it because he's of such a high caliber. But he pulled me aside afterwards and he said, "You've got some talent. You've got something there. I really want to help you in any way that I can." And he did. He started putting the word out. He started mentioning me to other people that he worked with over here. And then the ball started rolling. We had Kazuchika Okada, who at the time was the heavyweight champion, the IWGP champion. He came out to a show in Victoria in November of that same year. I did a seminar under him. he knew who I was through Will mentioning me. So it kind of just was this snowball effect. Then they did a tour of Australia in early 2018, and I was a part of that for 3 out of the 4 shows. And I worked my ass off and just was polite, humble backstage, and then performed as best as I could in the ring. And all that stuff just kept helping me. And then it wasn't until one time where I was with Bad Luck Fale in New Zealand for a seminar run by one of the Japanese guys over there that he mentioned to me that there might be this opportunity to join the Bullet Club. And then I was like, hey, sounds good. Anything that's going to get me closer to being there, because from that match with Will Ospreay in, I think it was August of 2017, I was like, okay, cool. Soon I can quit my job. Soon I can just do wrestling. And we were kind of like around April, May at this point. And I was like, how has it not happened yet? So when that opportunity presented itself, but it was still, hey, it won't be till October. I was like, shit, I have to wait till October. Mm. October rolled around. I got to do a tour over here. And then it was still nothing. It was still just kind of like, oh yeah, we'll call you. And I was like, fuck, like, what am I going to do? And it wasn't until 2019, I had it was almost a come to Jesus moment. Like I needed more time off for a tour of the States that I had kind of booked alongside WrestleMania, because WrestleMania always produces like a week long of independent wrestling shows in the States. And it's a really good opportunity to get seen and to get more experience and to get more exposure. So I was making the trip over with my wife and a few friends to just kind of experience the whole week. And I had already been contacted by a few independent promotions about working for them. So I'd put in the leave for work, and they had turned around and said, you can't take any more leave. You've got no leave left. And I was like, that's cool. Just don't pay me. And they're like, no, we can't do that. We need you here. Because at this point I was in a very important role at my 9 to 5. So I came back the next day, told them that I was resigning because I needed this time off and they weren't going to give it to me. And then the day after that, where I still had to go into work for 4 weeks, obviously, I was going into a team meeting where we were planning the rest of the year, which I thought was so irrelevant because I had just resigned. But I was there anyway. Straight after that day meeting, I'm driving home and I'm kind of like, in my own head about, I'm going to have to be an Uber Eats driver. I'm going to have to do some crazy shit to try and make ends meet. What am I going to do? I get a call, and it was to offer me a full-time gig over here in New Japan Pro Wrestling. So the stars really just aligned. And because I took that gamble on myself and I bet on myself, I think it paid off.
Yeah. Talk about the stars aligning. Like it's so funny when people do that they take that kind of a leap where they're like, all right, I've backed myself so much, but now I'm removing that like safety blanket. And then, good things do happen, obviously not all the time, but like a lot of the time people are rewarded for, finally going, fuck it, I'm in.
Yeah, it was a very surreal experience having the conversation 24 hours previously with my wife saying, hey, I don't know what I'm going to do. I had to quit. And obviously I warned her that was a potential beforehand. And she's been my number one supporter since we met. She's been so great. So she was like, whatever you have to do, we'll make it work. We'll find a way, even if you have to pick up casual jobs or, be a delivery driver or whatever it may be. And then when I got that call on the way home from work, I pulled into a parking lot that I was nearby and I called her straight after. And I was like, hey, that conversation we had the night before? Well, that's irrelevant. Here's a conversation I just had now. And she was just like, no, you're fucking joking. You're fucking joking. And I was like, no, it's real. Like I'm now a full-time professional wrestler. And we had wine that night, of course, to celebrate, but like, oh man, it was such a cool feeling to share that with her first as well. And for her to be so excited, like any other person just would have been like, oh, that's great. And it's like they care, but they don't really care. She was as excited, if not more excited than I was. So, yeah, I was very fortunate that I took that leap and it worked out.
That's great. We love special moments like that. Talk about the common misconceptions when it comes to wrestling and maybe some things that you think would probably surprise people to learn about the industry.
I guess the main thing is the F word that people use. I don't like to say it, but how real is professional wrestling, I guess is a better way to put it. And the thing I always tell people is I go, so talk to me about the injuries I've had. I've torn my MCL in a match. I've had my head split open multiple times. I've been, I've had dislocated ankles. I've had, right now I've got a ruptured eardrum. All that stuff doesn't happen from it not being real. You know what I mean? So like, that's the first misconception that people have. They think that it's this pantomimed stunt show where people aren't hitting each other. But all it takes is for you to go to one live wrestling event and to see a match in person. And if you're even in the third row, you feel it, you see it, you hear it, you know it's real. The cool thing about some local events in Australia is if there's no, like, I guess, crowd protecting barriers in front of their seats, often I've always found it's been in Australia. It doesn't really happen anywhere else. It's just like the way that we are. You'll just get the old boy from up the back. He's got his VB in one hand. He walks up to the ring during intermission and he'll just give it a pat on the side. And he goes, "Oh, it's bloody hard, isn't it? Thought it was a trampoline." So all it takes is for them to do that once, and they realize, oh, these people are throwing themselves or getting thrown onto this on like a consistent basis. That doesn't feel good. And it doesn't. Even hitting the ropes. There's two different types of ropes in professional wrestling. Some of it is made out of actually like nylon rope, but the other is made out of a steel cable with like a plastic tubing over it. And when you're learning to hit those ropes in training, you get welts on your back because you're not just hitting it once or twice and going, yeah, I'm done. You're doing laps. You're doing it for time. You got to get it right. You got to hit the right spot so that you're bouncing off in the right way. So even something that people wouldn't think is one of the painful parts of pro wrestling is probably the most painful part of professional wrestling. And then I guess the other thing is how vulnerable we are in the ring is like a misconception. And this is more from the fans or from casual people attending. Just like at the footy, we've seen now in history, if someone yells something out at a player, it now can become a big deal. That happens to us in professional wrestling, and it's kind of like a double-edged sword, because if you are portraying a villain or a not so nice person, you might say stuff with the idea of you're trying to incite a reaction. And the way that we look at it is, rather than sport, we're closer to, I guess, film and television in that sense. Is some people want to be hated because they want that reaction from the audience. They don't want to be cheered. They thrive on people doubting them and booing them and whatever else. So because of that, some things might get said, some things might be done that sometimes can cross the line, or just cross the line for each individual, and then something gets thrown back. So if it's words, if it's a gesture, I don't think people realize that even though we're doing something and we're not trying to attack people individually, as the performer, they then say something back to us, and we have to kind of just take it in the ring. And then afterwards you go, oh shit, like what they said like really hurt, or it was like really personal about me, or it was something about, like, body image is such a really conscious thing in professional wrestling, because we're wrestling in usually not a lot of clothing. So because of that, we're on full display. And not all wrestlers are the most confident people, because it's their escape. Professional wrestling is like the thing that they like to do or what they love. So even though they look great and they're athletes and they do these amazing things, inside they might need a little bit of a confidence boost. So to get yelled some negativity, that can really hurt. So I think people need to remember that professional wrestlers are real people, just like anyone else. Like, you don't walk to the red carpet and see Hugh Jackman and tell him his last movie was a piece of shit. If you're there at the red carpet for whatever reason, you're probably there supporting the film or him as an actor, right? So it's kind of like that. Like, don't come to the wrestling and say something really volatile to the person. You can kind of do it within the veins of the character and within what the story is that we're telling in the ring. But don't come after me because I haven't shaved my face that day and you want to come after my facial hair. That's not part of the act. That's just me as the person. So I think they're the main misconceptions. There's definitely a lot more. If I were to dive further, I don't think people understand how stressful it is to be part of like a touring company. the travel, the commitment to, staying on your diet, staying in shape, staying injury free and preventing that too. Like a lot of the times we're working with little injuries all the time, just like any other athlete is, whether it's from training or from the last performance or last match that we've had. So that's probably it in like a round circle. But I mean, there could be more. It's just those are the ones that I'm more aware of.
Yeah, it's such a strange part in society, not just Australian society, but every society when it comes to athletes and how we approach them. It's if an athlete misses a goal or something like, and it's on your team, and often people feel that as personal, and that's why they attack, which is such a strange thing because you wouldn't come into my office and be like, like that Excel spreadsheet's a piece of shit. Like, what are you doing? Like, nice beard. Like, and that's one thing that I guess I always sort of try and keep in mind is the fact that like, doesn't matter if the fact that you're on a big stage or, football players on a bigger stage, they are literally humans, just like me. I'm largely protected from making mistakes and not getting abused on, say, Twitter for it. But it is honestly one of the most bizarre parts in our society is just how many people do think that this is okay, this is my right, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with me doing this sort of, abusive behavior.
Yeah, that's why I really try and carry myself as a nice person. And I'm glad that that's my reputation amongst my peers and a lot of even fans that have met me and interacted with me at like the merchandise table, because I very much breed that ideology of positivity first. And, a little bit of karma, I guess. Like if I'm nice to you, you'll be nice to someone else. So I kind of just want to go, hey, I can be competing at this high level and be fulfilling my dream and wrestling for a living. But it doesn't mean I need to be a dick about it now. Like I'm not going to treat the people that are still in the independent scene, like, doing that weekend warrior kind of spirit. I'm not going to treat them any differently. I'm not treating them beneath me or anything like that. I'm still treating them like peers, because if I'm a part of that scene at any point, especially now, I still get to compete at that level. I'm super appreciative because I still remember where I came from. And even though I am where I am, I'm not The Rock. I'm not Stone Cold Steve Austin. I don't have a ranch and millions of dollars. I can't be like that. And even if I did have that, I'd probably be more like, hey, you want to come over? You want to hang out? Like, you want to stay at my place for a couple of weeks? You're doing it tough right now, whatever. I'd be more willing to help out because I think it's that paying it forward attitude that's gotten me to where I am.
Yeah, 100%. That's a perfect mantra. And paying it forward is always such a wonderful thing when you can do it when you're in the spot. So I applaud you for that. Let's stay on The Rock. The Rock obviously has the rock bottom. Stone Cold has the stunner. What does Robbie Eagles have that turns the lights out on opponents?
So Robbie Eagles has the Ron Miller special, which is actually a submission hold. And it's in dedication to one of our great Australian champions from the 60s and 70s when professional wrestling was on television locally in Australia, and we were getting the greats from overseas compete here. So there was a guy called Ron Miller, and he used a reverse figure four. And that's kind of been my ode to him. The difference between he and I is he was kind of more of a stand-up technician. He'd just apply the hold and he would get the tap-out victory. I have a setup that really incapacitates my opponents, and I do what's called a 450 splash, which is basically a double rotation front flip into like a belly flop, I guess is the best way to like describe it. But I hit that on my opponent's leg, and then I wrap them up in the Ron Miller special, the reverse figure four. So they get that direct impact on their knee, and then I tie them up into a pretzel and just really start cranking on it. They have no choice but to tap it out.
I mean, just hearing about it makes me squirm and want to tap, and I haven't even experienced it. That's crazy. Explain what a normal week sort of looks like for you in terms of, preparation physically, mentally, and then also, in the not just the physical side, but the studying of say your previous matches and you say your opponent as well.
Yeah, I guess the best way to look at it is when I'm here on tour in Japan, because when I am back home, it is a little bit more like time off for me. The matches are fewer and far between because we can't do it as consistent as it is for a schedule over here. So a normal week would be pretty much a lot of that routine that I spoke about earlier on. It'd be day to day. It'd just be get up, eat right, have a little bit of mindfulness to myself first thing in the morning, catch up on any emails or messages that I've gotten overnight, because I've got a lot of friends in the US, and also the time difference here. Some people are up earlier than me back home in Australia. So once I do that, then it's okay, what's my plan for the day? What are my workouts going to be? What, if any injuries do I have that I need to kind of, do some recouping on and do some rehab on? So then I'll plan out my day like that, and I'll kind of space it around. Okay, there'll be a workout, then there'll be lunch, then there'll be a workout, then there'll be dinner. And then there's other things in between. There's tanning sessions. There's, do I need to go get a haircut before a match? So depending on when my next opportunity to do those things are, or when my opening in the schedule is, that's pretty much what Monday to Friday will look like for me. The matches here can fall on any day, so that can be broken up by having match. And if I'm on the road, my schedule will change, because sometimes we have 4, 5, 6, 8-hour bus rides in between. And so a lot of that will be get on the bus early in the morning, get to the next town, check into the hotel. And I'm a bit of a crazy man, so I'll then find the nearest gym and then head straight there after doing that bus ride, get the workout in, and then eat and sleep, and then recover for the match the next day. In terms of like further prep, it's like one of my things is I have like not superstitions, but I'm very much set in my ways. And if I do something differently, sometimes I feel a bit uneasy about it. When I pack my wrestling gear into my traveling bag, I have to pack it a specific way. So I do that first so that it's all there, good to go. I have like all my clothes for however many days I'm going to be on the road. I pack all my supplements to make sure that I'm all good for like nutrition and stuff like that whilst I'm away. And then the study will be kind of in the evening periods. So I'll either put on a more recent match that I've had, sometimes an older match to get inspiration on something that I haven't used in the ring before as a technique or an advantage that I might have against my next opponent. Or like I mentioned, I'll study something from the past or the present. So I'll look to my inspirations from when I was growing up in wrestling and see if there's something they did that I can kind of bring into my game, or look at the current wrestlers that are getting lots of traction in America and the UK, everywhere in the world, basically, and go, okay, what are these guys doing? I want to be prepared for if I ever wrestled them. And then likewise, if I had a big title match coming up, because I am a champion, I look to who my next opponent's going to be for that championship, who I've got to defend against. And then I'll start breaking down their matches and go, okay, have I had matches with them before? Yes, let's watch those. Where did I make mistakes? Where can I not falter on the next one? Because this is more important now more than ever. So I'll do that. Some points I'll watch 3 to 4 matches a night, and then I'll realize, oh, it's 1 a.m. I should probably get some sleep. But that's generally what day to day, week to week looks like for me, with lots of traveling, lots of extracurricular stuff as well. Sometimes I do some signings, some interviews, some appearances. I've shot videos and stuff for mobile apps that are due to come out. So there's a lot of craziness being a part of like a bigger corporation, but I take it as it comes, and I try to keep my schedule pretty flexible, and I'm not too hard on myself if I miss a workout one day, or if I didn't have the best lunch that day because I was out and about instead of being able to cook it for myself. So I've definitely been that kind of person that was very, very disciplined and almost too hard on himself, whereas now I'm kind of like, hey, as long as I feel good, most important thing.
Yeah, I love the little flex there on the championship, just to make sure you got that in. Talk about that, and I know that was recent that you became that champion, so talk about that match and sort of how that feels.
It was so special, and I've spoken about it to a few people in press and media before, but I almost didn't make it for this trip because the day I left Sydney is the day the lockdown started. And there was an issue with me leaving 2 days previous where I had called up and made sure that I had all my ducks in a row. And I said, do I need to get an exemption to leave? And they're like, no, you're sweet. I get to the airport and Border Force are like, yeah, you need an exemption. You can't prove to us that that you have these things that make you eligible to leave Australia. And I was like, I have a work visa. I'm a resident of Japan. Like, I have all these things that, state that I can come and go as I please, basically based around coronavirus and all the restrictions that we've got. But yeah, so they turned me away. I missed the flight and I scrambled for 48 hours to get a new flight and get all the stuff that they said I needed to get this exemption. And I made it the day the lockdown started. But it almost didn't happen, right? So I got here, spent my 2 weeks quarantine in Japan, and then kind of went straight to the ring after that, and led into a big Tokyo Dome match at the end of the end of July. Yeah, it was the end of July, where I wrestled the former champion El Desperado for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title. And the cool thing for me was, the time difference between Australia and Japan, now it's 2 hours, but back then in July, it was only 1 hour, is great for my friends and family back home because it's so close to like our time zone that it's not like a difficult thing for them to watch something at 5 p.m. on the lockdown. So all my friends and family were tuning in for the match that I had. So I felt really supported going into that. I don't think anyone expected me to win the championship, because I've fought for that title before in Festival Hall in Melbourne in front of 2,500, 3,000 people all cheering for me, and I wasn't able to get it. So it's kind of like, okay, I'm in this big building that normally seats 50,000 people. There's much less because of the restrictions that we have here in Japan at the moment during the state of emergency. But I'm here. None of my supporters are backing me. Everyone's back home. So I kind of had that in the back of my head. But I was like, if I couldn't win it with everyone behind me and being there and cheering and feeling it and seeing it, how am I going to do in this foreign situation? And somehow I overcame. I won the championship. And it was super special because it was a culmination of my career. That was the goal, that to be the champion of this division in this company was the thing that I always wanted to set myself out to do since I was, probably like 12, 13 years old when I first caught wind of Japanese professional wrestling like properly and really started studying it and watching it. And then I took a few moments to not touch my phone after the match because I knew I was going to get a few messages from people back home, and it was incredible. The support, like once I turned it on and like checked my messages and checked social media, the support I was getting from everyone back home was so touching. There was like videos of people screaming when I won from like Instagram stories and stuff. And every time I'd watch each one, I'd start breaking down and cry all over again, just because I was like, the fact that these people are so happy for me to have achieved this. And they're so distant too. They could have, like in any other world, they could have been along for the trip with me. They could have been here, but because of what we have at the moment in the world, they couldn't be. Just made me feel very loved and made me really appreciate the way that I've been in my life towards those people, because they obviously, like, I care about them and they're reciprocating that feeling. So, yeah, I mean, the main thing is it was a culmination of my career, and the fact that, everyone that I'd crossed paths with was so supportive of me in that venture. I'm so proud to represent all of them and to represent Australia as the first ever Australian to win a championship in New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Yeah, it's so funny how sort of single athletes like yourself, whether that be a tennis player or a golfer or whatever, can kind of feel isolated through a lot of the journey, and the fact that, you almost feel like, not that nobody cares, but you do feel like you're literally on this journey alone. And then when you do achieve something like, say, you've achieved and you see all these people, you sort of stop there and you're like, holy crap, like, look at all these people who have kind of really been with you, along the journey, but, you necessarily probably haven't felt that the entire time.
Yeah, definitely after that championship win, that's when people that I had even lost touch with over the last few years, just through, life, like they've got kids and full on careers, or they've moved or whatever it is. The outreaching that I saw from those people as well was incredible, because whether they were a long-term fixture of this journey or they were just there for a short minute, they were still a part of it. So to see that outpouring was really, really special, and it really meant a lot to me. And it's made me kind of like I'm very much like, oh, I should really reach out to this person, or I should message such and such to see how they're doing because we haven't spoken in a long time. And sometimes I feel really bad about not being able to do that more, but I also know I'm away from home more often than not. So, I mean, a message is okay, but if I say, let's catch up, and then it's, 9-10 months before I even have the opportunity to do that, what's the point? I'm kind of like, leading people on sometimes. But to hear it from other people coming the other way, from messages to come from them first, I was like, oh, that's great. They must feel kind of the same as me. So it makes me really, like, brings me down to earth and kind of realize that everyone's kind of like what we were talking about before, everyone's human. But yeah, I'm so lucky to have had the people for this journey, whether it was, the people from school that were letting me be the wrestling kid and be a little bit annoying and obsessive at times, but dealing with it, and then seeing my achievements now, or the people that have been a part of professional wrestling with me, either as my coaches, as training peers, as opponents even. And then, my immediate family, my wife, my mum, my sister and her husband, my brother-in-law, who used to be a professional wrestler as well. It's super, super important that I have all these great, fantastic people in my life, because even now I can have some bleaker days, and they're the reason that I keep on going.
I'm not going to ask you sort of what's next, because obviously you touched on, you've just achieved this goal, which was something that you set out to do for, since you were 12. But do you sort of have sights on things that you sort of want to achieve and tick off moving forward?
Look, the big one for me, that's a shared goal. Like, obviously I want to be the best Robbie Eagles can be in New Japan Pro Wrestling. So there's other things that I haven't done yet. There's the IWGP Junior Tag Team Championships, which I'm going to get an opportunity for in one of my next matches. So I've never won those, and I've got a pretty good partner in the legendary Tiger Mask. If you Google him, you'll just see the accolades that this man has had, and you'll be like, man, this guy is legit. So I've got a great partner who's teaching me a lot of things. I want to defend the championship as much as I can. So I've got a title defense coming up in about a month's time, I think. And there's a big thing called the Best of the Super Juniors coming up in November, which is a tournament where the best of this division come together and compete in a point system, kind of like the Premiership for NRL, or the season for AFL. Whoever has the most points at the end goes on to the finals, and the two finalists battle out for the trophy. So I haven't won that. I haven't been in the finals yet. So that's like the immediate kind of next step goals here in New Japan Pro Wrestling. The long-term goal that I've always had since day one, since I started in professional wrestling in 2008, was the US, the UK, Mexico, Japan. These countries are the ones synonymous with pro wrestling, and where people kind of venture to and move to like make it or make themselves in professional wrestling. I want Australia to be that place. I want there to be like a big touring company in Australia that's so kind of like above and beyond what we have now, that people can not have to have a 9 to 5, but work full-time for this group or this organization, or for just professional wrestling in Australia. Myself and another guy from back home, Mick Moretti, that's kind of been like our vision. For as much as we venture off and do things in other countries and start making names for ourselves, we're always paying it forward and bringing it back to Australia. And we're going, hey, if you think I'm great, come look at all this stuff, or look at the matches I had back in Australia back in 2017 and 2016. And here's the back catalog. And now you can discover some of our favorites, who are our training partners and our peers and our opponents from back there. So that's kind of like the big one. Like, I want to make Australia one of the destinations for professional wrestlers all over the world. I don't want them to just be like, I want to get signed by an American company, or I want to get signed to New Japan Pro Wrestling like Robbie is. I want them to come to Australia and be like, I want to work for PWA. I want to work for EPW. Like, I want them to think that these are the be all end alls. And not only do they get like a great backdrop of the Australian outback to live in, but I think I'd contest that the pro wrestlers in Australia are better than some of the best in the world, quote unquote, in other parts of the world that are more well known on the mainstream.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible, mate. And that's, you mentioned before, that is paying it forward to a T. So, look, mate, you're an absolute star. Thank you so much for jumping on and had a chat. I had a lot of fun going through and learning a lot about you and what you do professionally. So, hopefully, moving forward, we see grab another belt or two.
That would be perfect. Just call me Robbie Two Belts.
That's a good nickname.
I like the ring of it, so we'll see how this tag team title match goes.
Yeah, no, all good. Good luck with that, mate, and thanks again.
Thank you, Chris. It's been a pleasure.